Joyland in Wichita, Kansas was a small amusement park that ended up with a long history of accidents, bad press, and one of the most brutal killings the city had ever seen, a man impaled by a group of teens sneaking in after hours. Brandywine Springs in Delaware was a cozy little park until a rejected man showed up with a firearm, took the lives of 2 people, and tried to burn the place to the ground. And Holyland USA in Connecticut was supposed to be a tribute to faith, but after it shut down and fell into decay, something incredibly disturbing happened there. These are abandoned theme parks with disturbing backstories. First up is Joyland Amusement Park, which was anything but joyful. This one opened in 1942 in Wichita, Kansas. Originally, it was a pretty limited setup. There were just a few rides, but it expanded over the years to include bumper cars, carnival games, a haunted house, and the park hosted outdoor concerts and festivals too. For a while, it was the go-to summer spot in the area, but for all the fun that happened there, the park was also the site of some extremely dark moments. The most disturbing was the death of Michael King. He was a man who'd confronted 4 teenagers for sneaking into the park after hours. What happened next was beyond brutal. The teens attacked him, and he ended up getting impaled and left to die. 2 of the attackers were underage and avoided charges. The other 2 were tried and convicted. But even with the crime hanging over the park, Joyland didn't close. But trouble kept following. Over the years, there were a number of accidental deaths. One person reportedly fell off a roller coaster. Another worker was crushed while doing maintenance. Standard carnival horror stories, sure, but when they start piling up, it's hard not to think the place was cursed. Eventually, after yet another tragedy, this time someone falling to their death from the Ferris wheel, Joyland was starting to feel the negative effects of its increasingly negative reputation. Insurance became a nightmare, attendance dropped, and finally in 2004, the park shut down. For years the place sat empty, rotting in the Kansas sun. Rides were rusting, graffiti covered every surface. But then in 2018, a couple named Gregory and Tina Dungan bought the grounds with plans to turn it into an event venue for concerts, traveling carnivals, and weddings. Because nothing says eternal love like saying your vows at the sight of multiple deaths and one very infamous killing. I mean, what kind of wedding playlist do you even put together for something like that? Next up, we have Brandywine Springs in Wilmington, Delaware. This one might just be the oldest theme park on the list. It was open from 1886 to 1923. Not much of it is left today. It's mostly just a park with walking trails and a few markers, but back in the day, Brandywine Springs was a pretty happening place. There was a wooden roller coaster, a train that looped around the grounds, and a place called the Castle House, which was kind of the central attraction. It wasn't on the scale of Disneyland, obviously, but for its time, it was a pretty magical little spot. But not everything about the park was family friendly. In 1916, Brandywine Springs was the scene of a violent crime. A man named Samuel Gungus had become obsessed with Catherine Bodecki, a waitress who worked at the park's restaurant. Catherine did not return Samuel's feelings. She rejected him, and he did not take this well, which is a major understatement. By didn't take it well, I mean he completely snapped. He showed up one day in a fit of rage and shot both Catherine and her friend, Aretty Nichols, who'd had the bad luck of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Gungus wasn't done. He tried to burn the whole park down. He set fire to the restaurant, the photo gallery, the nearby concession stands. It was a full-on arson spree. That day definitely marked a turning point, but the park limped along for a few more years. Eventually, though, it closed for good in 1923. Now it's just this quiet, wooded area where people jog and walk their dogs, but some say they've seen things there, shadowy figures in the early morning fog, and supposedly the area near where the old restaurant was always feels colder than the rest of the park. There used to be a theme park called Holyland USA in Waterbury, Connecticut. It was abandoned for a while, having closed in 1984, but in 2014 it actually reopened, and it's now open to the public during daylight hours. For a while, though, it was just a decaying skeleton. It was originally built as a religious theme park in the 60s. There were miniature versions of famous biblical landmarks like a tiny Jerusalem, small-scale temples, and statues of angels and saints scattered around the hills. It attracted thousands of Christian tourists back in the day, but by 1984 the park fell into disrepair and it was shut down. Nature started taking over that and vandals, and for a long time it looked like a war zone with rusting structures and crumbling statues, shattered glass everywhere. But then came a real horror story. In 2010, two teenagers, Chloe Ottman and Francisco Cruz, decided to sneak into the abandoned park. Now, this wasn't anything unusual. Lots of people had done it before. Chloe and Francisco were friends. They knew each other through school and church, and there was no reason for her to feel unsafe. But that night, something changed. Francisco made unwanted advances. When Chloe turned him down, he snapped. He forced himself on her, then killed her before dragging her body into the woods. Eventually he confessed though, and police found Chloe's body. Francisco was sentenced to 55 years in prison.
Number 3. Joyland deaths. Located in Wichita, Kansas, Joyland once featured state-of-the-art rides and attractions, holding a reign of 55 years of fun and joy. Today, the once popular park is being reclaimed by nature, piece by piece by piece. So Joyland came into existence on June 12th of 1949 and was founded by Lester Ottaway and his sons, Herbert and Harold. Herb Ottaway had a passion for steam engines and race cars, and he refurbished both types of vehicles. By 1934, Herb had refurbished a miniature steam locomotive and cars and was traveling with them to county fairs in Kansas and Colorado. Joyland was open to give Herb's refurbished locomotive a more permanent home. As the attraction became more popular, the Ottaways eventually added a number of different rides and games to the amusement park. Lester Ottaway passed away in the mid-1950s, and his sons continued running Joyland until the early 1970s when they decided to retire. Joyland was then sold to Stanley and Margaret Nelson, who owned the park until it closed its doors in 2004. Joyland featured attractions such as a wooden roller coaster, which I love, a wacky shacky dark ride, a log jam, a sky coaster, bumper cars, a carousel, and a Ferris wheel. On April 6th of 2004, a 13-year-old girl was enjoying a Ferris wheel ride with her friends when the restraint bar holding them in came undone. The young girl fell more than 30 feet, suffering multiple head, arm, and leg injuries. The Ferris wheel was immediately closed while both private and federal investigators looked into whether everything was safe and up to code. The ride was later reopened after these investigations were wrapped up. Also, another notable ride at Joyland was the wooden roller coaster that was known as the Nightmare. Although the roller coaster was a staple at the amusement park, it too saw its fair share of injuries, which is a shame. Like, I really love wooden coasters. On May 25th of 1977, somebody in the single digits of age stood up in one of the carts and fell, died at the scene from the injuries sustained from the fall. Another death occurred 20 years later, on August 27th of 1998, when 35-year-old maintenance worker Kevin Briley was under the ride trimming the grass. He stood up and was tragically hit by the coaster and passed away. My heart hurts telling that tale because, like I said already, I'm such a huge lover of traditional wooden roller coasters. You know, there's just something about narrowly avoiding whiplash that I personally find thrilling. And go figure, Joyland closed its doors in 2004. Number 2, doomed before it could open. The Pripyat amusement park was set to have its grand opening on May 1st of 1986, in time for the May Day celebrations, but these plans were cancelled on April 26th when the Chernobyl disaster occurred, just a couple of kilometers away. Several sources report that the park was opened for a short time on April 27th before the announcement to evacuate the city was made to distract, residents from the unfolding disaster nearby. Constructed under the Soviet Union as a park of culture and rest, typical of many large cities in the then Soviet Union, the amusement park's attractions were manufactured by the Yeskik-based firm Attraction, who were responsible for the construction of many of the amusement parks which remain to be seen around the former Soviet Union today in various states of repair. Located northwest to the Palace of Culture in the center of Pripyat, the park had 5 attractions. The iconic 26-meter Ferris wheel titled Circular Overview, Autodrome bumper cars, a paratrooper ride called Chamomile, Russian swing boats, and also a carnival Pew Pew game. Fun fact, the successor to the original company is still manufacturing the Ferris wheel, paratrooper, and bumper cars to the similar designs as of 2017. Radiation levels around the park kind of vary though. The liquidators washed radiation into the soil after the helicopters carrying radioactive materials used the grounds as a landing strip, so concrete areas are less radioactive. However, areas where moss has built up can emit levels amongst the highest levels of radiation in the whole of Pripyat. So the Ferris wheel actually made news in September of 2017 when Polish tourists turned it mechanically for the first time since 1986. Thankfully, they returned it back to its original position, but kinda neat that it could still work. Number 1, a cursed history. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park opened its doors in 1926 when proprietor Conley Snidow Sr. purchased the land. His vision to build a place for local families to relax and enjoyed time together was realized as the coal miners from local towns descended on it each year, making it a fantastic destination for summer vacations. The park was full of activities. It featured a man-made swimming lake, a racetrack, concessions, and cabins for visitors, looking for an overnight stay. The big cornerstones were the Ferris wheel and the swings, two rides that were popular with everyone who spent time at the park. And you know what? That all sounds pretty idyllic to me. Tragedy, though, began to grip the amusement park in the 1950s, when several deaths shocked locals. A young girl's life ended on the swing ride when a delivery truck backed into her seat, killing her in place. Another youngster lost his life when he drowned in the swimming pool after his arm got stuck in a drain pipe. And by 1966, this amusement park closed its doors to the public, and the land sat dormant for decades. In the 1980s, the park again welcomed visitors when Gaylord White acquired the land and set out to restore it to its former glory. In addition to purchasing a Ferris wheel, he found a swing ride that seemed just like the swings that once thrilled guests. Now, fun fact, when they installed the swings on the property, they realized the swings weren't just similar, they were the exact same swings from years prior, something that they decided to advertise during the grand reopening. The Lake Shawnee Amusement Park welcomed tens of thousands of visitors during its second run, which ran for just 3 years in the 1980s. Unfortunately, high insurance prices forced the White family to close their doors for the second and final time after those couple of short seasons, forcing them to pivot to other activities to keep the land active. They hosted fishing tournaments in what used to be the swimming lake, and they planned to create a space on the property for mud bogging, a motorsport the family knew would draw crowds to watch. While excavating a mud bogging track, the White family made a series of surprising discoveries that added depth to the property's history. For starters, the park was built over a Native American burial ground, with an archaeological dig uncovering 13 bodies, mostly young folks. In the 1700s, the property was the active home base for the Native Americans until they seemed to suddenly disappear. Among the bracelets, clothing, and tools that excavators found, they also found mass graves that suggested as many as 30,000 people had been buried on the property. But, that's not the darkest history of the land. In 1783, Mitchell Clay was the first European settler to make a home in the area, which was heavily inhabited by the Shawnee Native American tribe. So while Clay was gone to town one day, the Shawnees surrounded 3 of the Clay descendants who were working in the fields. Bartley met his end first, and Tabitha, hearing the explosion, ran to her brother, where she was attacked and cut by a stabby implement. Her body was dismembered, and both of their scalps were taken by the entire group. Their brother Ezekiel was captured and burned at the stake. A historical marker on the road leading to the park commemorates their memories. One could wonder if the tragic history of the grounds is the reason for the 6 deaths that occurred at the park, eventually leading to it being closed down in 1966. And many locals, including the park's new owner, claim the park to still be haunted. Number 5, the Warner Brothers Jungle Habitat. Originally opening on July 19th of 1972, this park closed its doors by 1976, which is a really bad timeline for a theme park that was technically never completed. The first time Jungle Habitat made headlines was only months after it first opened for business, when an Israeli tourist named Abraham Levy was riding through the safari in a taxi cab and decided to roll down the window to get a better look at some of the animals roaming about. 2 lions attacked the car and mauled the 26-year-old tourist, causing lacerations to his face and shoulder. He took credit for the harm, citing his own foolishness, which helped to dodge a media onslaught. Well, for the most part. By the end of the year, reports of animals escaping into the wilds of West Milford were far too many in volume to be ignored. Besides sightings of harmless animals like peacocks, there were rumors spreading about dangerous animals such as a pack of wolves and a lion being sighted along local roads. These sentiments, voiced 28 years ago, are identical to the rumors still running rampant today. Yep, you heard me, today. Tales told by West Milford residents who have looked out in their backyards include wandering ostriches and a band of baboons running amok in the town's pharmacy. Emus, baboons, and even wolves are just some of the uncaged critters which were known to have escaped the park. I feel like I found the origins for the Night at the Museum franchise. On July 8th of 1974, a 68-year-old visitor from Long Island was grabbed by the trunk of a baby elephant, which then slammed her against a fence and bit her. The woman, Elizabeth Ennis, was later awarded $200,000 by a court. In an account in the New York Times, she claimed the elephant bit her on her right hand, and because of the trauma incurred by being slammed into the fence, she had persistent pain in her right side that prevented her from lifting heavy items. Her husband was awarded $5,000 for loss of companionship. So the animals at the park also had a tendency to damage the cars that passed through. An e-museum for the park says that tigers like to bite and pop car tires, and monkeys like to rip antennas off of cars. Sounds like a lack of good animal training and boundaries to me. So right after the park closed in 1976, some animal carcasses were left outside. This pile grew until 30 animal bodies, including that of an elephant, a bison, a camel, some zebras, were all left lying until April, when the ground had thawed enough to finally bury what was left of the bodies. The 6 months that they were left exposed was a violation of state laws, which stated that any animal should be buried within 48 hours of its death. Despite this violation, Warner Brothers was not sanctioned. Jungle habitat is gone now, but not forgotten. Reports of mysterious kangaroo sightings in remote corners of West Milford still turn up from time to time. Number 4. Under the Sea Gone Wrong. Disney's River Country was the first water park at Walt Disney World, and possibly the first themed water park ever. Look, as much as I love Disney World, and I'm mentally planning my next trip back, I'm here to call a spade a spade. Some consider River Country to be the first water park anywhere, but that depends on how you define a water park. Yes, River Country opened almost a year before Wet n Wild in Orlando, but there were public pools and lake parks with water slides and other aquatic play equipment long before River Country opened. So just as Disneyland had reinvented the amusement park 21 years earlier, River Country reinvented aquatic recreation. The water park's grand opening was on June 20th of 1976, and on Thursday, August 28th of 1980, a sad Associated Press story appeared in newspapers throughout North America. It was reported that a rare but deadly disease caused by an amoeba found in Florida freshwater lakes had claimed its 4th victim, a New York youngster who had spent his vacation swimming at River Country. The disease, amoebic meningoencephalitis, attacked the nervous system and brain. You don't want to know how many tries it took me to say that. The youngster died after the amoeba entered his nose, went through the nasal passage, and attacked the nervous system, including the brain. Investigators from the U.S. Center for Disease Control in Atlanta and the New York Health Department pinpointed River Country as the source of the amoeba after the parents reported that the amusement park was the only place where he went swimming. So photos and maps of River Country show that the park had 2 bodies of water. The smaller one was a clean, clear swimming pool. The larger one appeared to be a natural cove, completely open to Bay Lake, which is the largest natural lake at Walt Disney World. At some point in the 1990s, Walt Disney World banned swimming in its lake. The 1995 map of Walt Disney World still included the resort's beaches under the swimming section, whereas the 2000 edition made it clear that the beaches were strictly for sunbathing. But River Country stayed open. There was never another death from amoebic, very long word that I'm not going to try and say again, linked to River Country. But there were 2 drownings, one in 1982 and the other in 1989. So River Country had its normal seasonal closing at the end of the 2001 season, but when the time came for it to reopen for the 2002 season, it didn't. River Country never reopened.
Takano Numa Greenland. This is Japan's park that disappeared not once, but twice. Now, deep in the misty mountains of Fukushima, Japan, sits this amusement park, a theme park so cursed it was abandoned not once, but like I mentioned, twice. And the creepiest part, well, officially it doesn't even exist on maps anymore. Like, you won't be able to find it. The park first opened in 1973, but within just 2 years, it abruptly closed. Locals whispered about mysterious, passings on the rides, including a girl whose safety harness actually failed mid-loop on a roller coaster, sending her flying to her doom in front of horrified families. Now, the official explanation for the closure was just poor attendance. Nobody really wanted to show up, but eyewitnesses insist it was because of an alarming number of accidents. For some strange reason, the park actually reopened in the mid-1980s with, all brand new attractions. Yet again, it just didn't last. Within a few years, it was shut down permanently, swallowed by the surrounding forest. Now, the roller coasters sit half hidden under moss and vines, and the Ferris wheel kind of emerges like a skeleton through the mist. Urban explorers who managed to find the park describe a very overwhelming sense of dread. Cameras kind of malfunction when they're there, mist, just roll in unnaturally fast, and some claim to even see ghostly children wandering the grounds. One chilling legend says that a little girl who passed away on a roller coaster there still actually appears in photographs of the park. I mean, her face is very pale, her dress looks stained, and she is apparently staring directly at the cameras. So that's quite terrifying. Okpo Land. Now, this is the doom ride of South Korea. On a quiet hillside in South Korea, there once stood Okpo Land, a small amusement park with a reputation darker than honestly most horror films. Its most infamous attraction was a duck-themed roller coaster, which sounds cute, but it's not. It became the symbol of pure tragedy. In the 1990s, a young girl fell from one of the duck cars during a ride malfunction. She actually passed away instantly. Her body sprawled across the tracks, and here's the very disturbing part. The park didn't actually close after this. They simply just removed her body, covered up, all of the liquid that came out of her, and continued operating as if nothing had ever happened. For years afterward, visitors were, heard heard whispers and heard rumors about the cursed duck ride, and so they didn't really want to go on. But then again, in 1999, it struck again. Another child reportedly passed away in a nearly identical accident on the exact same ride. This time, the park did shut down overnight, rightfully so. I mean, workers abandoned everything. Half-eaten food sat rotting on tables, tickets remained stuck in the machines, and the infamous duck ride, well, it stood frozen mid-curve with cars dangling off the track. When urban explorers broke in years later, they found the duck coaster actually still intact, one car hanging kind of just precariously off the edge. A chilling reminder of, the child who passed away there, both of them. Now, locals now say the ghost of the girls haunts the site, forever riding their unfinished journey. The park was actually demolished in 2011, but its legend lives on as one of the darkest amusement park stories in the entire world. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park, this is the playground of doom. A little girl in a bright pink dress was riding her favorite attraction, the simple spinning, swing set. When tragedy struck, she was laughing one moment, and the next she was crushed by a delivery truck that backed into the ride while it was still in motion. Witnesses claimed her body flew several feet before collapsing to the ground. She was only one of at least 6 people who passed away at Lake Shawnee Amusement Park in Princeton, West Virginia, a place so cursed that locals now call it the Playground of Doom. But here's the chilling part. This land was doomed long before the rides were even built. In the late 1700s, it was the site of a very bad annihilation where a Native American tribe basically unalived a settler family for stealing their land. Now, later excavations uncovered over a dozen skeletal remains, many of them children, buried beneath the soil where the Ferris wheel and swings once stood. The park opened in the 1920s, run by an entrepreneur named Conley Snidow, but tragedy followed it like a shadow. A boy actually drowned in the swimming pool, another was impaled on a rusty piece of equipment, and a young man was electrocuted. Now, locals whispered that land itself was indeed cursed, and by the 1960s, the passings and lawsuits forced the park to shut down. Today, the Ferris wheel sits rusted, swings still creak in the wind, and paranormal investigators claim to actually hear children laughing at night when no one is actually around. Visitors say the little girl in the park dress is still kind of appears near the swing set where she passed away, smiling at first before vanishing into thin air. Six Flags New Orleans. Now, this is the park that drowned in silence. Imagine a massive amusement park frozen in time where roller coasters kind of stand motionless, game booths still display faded stuffed animals, and ticket stubs litter the ground as if guests left mid-ride. Now, that's Six Flags New Orleans, a theme park that was destroyed overnight when Hurricane Katrina struck in August of 2005. At first glance, it looks like a typical abandoned park, but what makes it dark is the horror of what happened in and around it during those floodwaters. The storm surge left the entire park submerged in over 20 feet of toxic water for weeks. Witnesses claimed to see bodies floating near the submerged roller coasters. Rescue workers reported very eerie screams echoing from the flooded parking lot as families were trapped in their cars, swept away in the chaos. Now, the park itself never reopened. Rides kind of just rusted in place. Looters tagged graffiti across decaying walls, and all the animatronics rotted from mold. Now, what's even more chilling though is that this wasteland has become a hotbed for urban explorers who claim to encounter shadowy figures walking through the flood-scarred remains. Now, some insist the park acts like a graveyard for the hundreds who drowned in the surrounding neighborhoods. Their restless spirits just seeking shelter amongst the rides. Now, the eerie setting has made Six Flags New Orleans, a favorite filming location actually for apocalyptic, movies like Jurassic World and also Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. But thrill seekers who trespass swear it feels like walking into a graveyard where the laughter of families was kind of drowned in silence forever.